Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Charity Village webinar. We will just wait a moment for everyone to join the session. Okay, we will get started. Welcome to today's Charity Village webinar. My name is Mercedes, and I'm the Marketing and Communications Specialist with Charity Village. As we are gathering here in a virtual platform, it is important to acknowledge that each of us is joining this webinar from the ancestral or unceded lands of the Inuit, Métis, and First Nation people. As a settler on this land, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Anishinaabe, which includes the Ojibwe of Fort William First Nation. For those who may be joining a Charity Village webinar for the first time, Charity Village is Canada's largest online job board for the nonprofit sector. In addition to our online job board, organizations can also post volunteer positions. So if you are looking for work or to recruit talent in the sector, Charity Village is a great place to start. We also have a ton of excellent resources for nonprofit professionals, including online courses, articles, fundraising tools, and free webinars like the one we are presenting today. Before we start today's webinar, I would like to quickly run through some housekeeping items. You may have noticed when you joined the webinar that you were automatically put on mute. Since we have hundreds of participants in today's session, it is important for us to minimize the amount of background noise so that everyone can clearly hear the presentation. But you can still ask questions and make comments using the question box at the bottom of the Zoom control panel. Look for that at the bottom of your screen. We will be taking questions at the end of the webinar, so please submit your questions as you think of them, and we will do our best to get to as many as possible. You can also email your questions to webinars@charityvillage.com. If you happen to encounter any technical issues with the webinar, whether with viewing the presentation or with the audio, please let us know in the question box or by sending us an email. We will do our best to get any technical difficulties resolved as quickly as possible, but in a worst case scenario, please remember that we are recording today's webinar and we will send you the full recording by email tomorrow. So if you get called away or disconnected, you will still be able to view the full presentation. And with that, I'd like to welcome our presenter for today, Julia Gockenbach, the Communications Manager at DonorPerfect. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here, and I'm so excited to talk about this with you all today. So this is getting off the fundraising treadmill, shake up your regular routine to raise more for your cause. As mentioned, we want to acknowledge the land that we're on. I am here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We are on Indigenous land. Here in Broward County, some of the original stewards of this place were the Tequesta, Misaki, and Seminole tribes. I hope to bring visibility to the historical legacy of these tribes as we honor the resilience of nations in Broward County. In this acknowledgement, we honor the memory and legacy of Florida's original peoples as defenders and stewards of the land. As our journey on this land continues, it is important that we acknowledge the history of the land, much of which has been intentionally erased or covered up by those in power. A land acknowledgement is not enough. We must commit our solidarity with sovereign and self-determination of all Native peoples, and this land acknowledgement is an opening for us all to understand in the role that each of us have in supporting the Native peoples. As mentioned, my name is Julia. I am the Communications Manager at DonorPerfect. Prior to working with DonorPerfect, I was a nonprofit employee for 10 years at 3 different nonprofits. So I have had a lot of different roles at nonprofits, everything from being the person who handles the database to being the single development representative to leading a development team. And in each of those roles, I had very different hats that I wore. So whatever role that you're here representing today, I totally understand, and I am empathetic to the many, many things that you have on your plate. Today, we're going to talk about some ideas for how to be creative in your roles, but I want to lead with, I know you're doing so much. So these are some ideas to help spur creativity, and just know you're already doing a great job, so don't worry about it. And we're just going to be a little creative today. So thank you so much for joining. So let's kick it off with defining what the fundraising treadmill is. So many of us know what fundraising is, many of us know what a treadmill is, but what is the fundraising treadmill? So I'm going to show you a fundraising treadmill by being a little bit vulnerable myself, because I was on a fundraising treadmill. I knew exactly what I was doing, no matter what month it was, no matter what year it was. I could anticipate the projects that I would be working on. This is an example of my planning calendar. Like I said, it doesn't matter what year this is. I know exactly what each of these lines mean. It doesn't even matter what was happening in our organization at that time, or what was happening in our community at that time. We had everything planned out no matter what, which was a little bit of a treadmill experience. We were doing the same thing year after year, not changing things up, not getting creative. So let me break down this graphic for you. For me, I knew every year that my golf fundraiser would be these red lines. From March to May, I knew we would be planning our golf fundraiser. I knew that the yellow lines in June represented the times that we were going to reorder our printed communications. So if something huge happened in our community for our organization, I wouldn't tell people about it in our general brochure until June, which was a little bit of an issue, because what if it was a big deal and we wanted to get the information out quickly? The light blue lines in January and July represent when we reorganized our major donor groups. Everybody on my staff had certain major donors that they cared for. But if somebody gave a huge donor gift in March for the golf tournament, they weren't placed into a major donor care group until July, which means that maybe we missed them somewhere. And then lastly, I think every nonprofit professional can anticipate when a year-end campaign is coming. But I was specifically on the treadmill for the year-end campaign because we did the same campaign every year, the same ask, the same graphics. It looked the same, very treadmill. So the fundraising treadmill is just kind of going through the motions, taking the steps one after the other, but not getting any further. Not falling backwards, you're still making movement, but not making any growth, which I was stuck in that because I was so used to this major plan that we had laid out, and I knew when to anticipate things. Now, there are some reasons that this happens to nonprofits. One, it could work. So for us, it did work every year. Every year we raised our budget. Every year we were ending in the black. Things were technically working. So why mess it up? Also, with a plan like that, I could really focus on my execution instead of ideation. At times, I was the only person on the development team. And so for my work to be spent coming up with new ideas would have taken extra time, and I didn't have that extra time, as I know many of you are already so involved in your organizations and you have so many things going on. Maybe you don't have that extra time. So having a treadmill, having a plan is maybe helpful. And then lastly, other staff members knew what to expect from them. So I had a lot of program staff, even when I was the only development person. So it was very easy for me to say, hey, you all are going to do the same thing that you did last year. You already know about the golf tournament. This is what I need from you, the same thing you did last year. So it was easier for me to coordinate the event or the campaign because everyone knew what to expect. But of course, there are some cons to having a treadmill. There's, obviously lack of creativity, but some other examples, maybe people would get bored. So one example of this is we had a few retention events, and between the two retention events, we played the same video at both. So people who were at the first retention event had already seen that video, so they weren't so interested when they saw it at the next one. And we had done an ask right before we played the video. So the people who had already seen it were not interested or captivated by the video. So they were distracting while we were hoping people would fill out pledge cards. So because we kind of took a treadmill approach to how we were going to do this ask, people got bored. Another thing is maybe problems aren't being solved. So for us, we did a crowdfunding campaign, and each year there were fewer and fewer crowdfunders representing that campaign. but we were still raising the amount we wanted to raise, so we didn't really conquer the problem in that scenario. We didn't try to fix the fact that we didn't have as many crowdfunders as we used to because we're still hitting the marks. And then lastly, maybe it just isn't working and you just don't have time to reconfigure everything. Maybe you aren't hitting your budgets, maybe you aren't hitting your goals, but you don't have time to reconfigure them. But that's what we're going to work through today, so don't worry. Let's talk about a couple benefits of leaving the treadmill, because sometimes it's very easy just to stay on the treadmill. Like I said, for me, things were working. Why leave? One, I would say diversity. So in the same way you have to diversify your workouts, I think of that meme where it's like the person with the really swole legs and the kind of noodly arms, and it says, every day can't be leg day. And that's the same with asking during fundraising. Every ask can't be an email. Every announcement can't be a social media post. You need to diversify the things that you're doing so that you don't have noodly arms when it comes to fundraising. You want to make sure to work the entire body. Also, a different kind of, let's say, to keep with the metaphor, other workout equipment may be beneficial. Let's replace workout equipment with fundraising campaigns. A different fundraising campaign may be more beneficial, but if you never get off the treadmill, then you won't know. And then lastly, you need to take time to evaluate. If you just continue walking on a treadmill day after day after day after day, you're not evaluating how your body is responding. You're not evaluating if you're doing it correctly. In order to really evaluate and make sure things are right, you need to take a step off and check things out. So I'm going to share a little success story with you here. This is Orange County School of the Arts. They are a DonorPerfect client, and they have had this set up for a really long time. They're a school, and 80% of their funding for their school comes from the state, but 20% of their funding comes from parents. And so for a long time, they have had a parent meeting at the beginning of the year. They hand out pledge cards, and they have parents pledge an amount they want to give. However, it took so much work because they would receive the pledge cards. They would, I don't know about you all, but if I receive a pledge card and it's hard to read, or there's so much information that I have to input into my CRM, it takes a lot of work. And these people could give multiple times throughout the year. So if they wanted to change their pledge because their daughter was part of a dance campaign, then they would have to call the office, change their pledge, and then the person putting in the information would have to change the pledge too. So they saw this as a very treadmill, arduous thing that they just kept doing over and over and over because they did it the year before, but they knew they needed to change it up. And so they did change it up. They figured out the best tools for them, which in their case, it was to use DonorPerfect in conjunction with a program called QGive. And that made their pledges electronic so that the middle person of putting in the information could be completely cut out. They needed to fix their system. They needed to get off their treadmill of doing the same thing over and over and over. And not only did they fix the pledges, but they went into crowdfunding so that parents could raise money from the community outside of the development office. So it was not only fixing something that they had been doing for a long time, but also a step up. Sometimes getting off the treadmill helps you to be a little more creative. So the question here is, are you on the fundraising treadmill? Like I said, I totally was. It was really hard for me to see it, but then, the third or fourth year that I pulled up that calendar and knew exactly what I was doing, I thought to myself, oh my goodness, we need to be a little more creative here. So I knew I was on the fundraising treadmill. Are you on the fundraising treadmill? Are there some things that you're doing year after year just because you did it the year prior? I'm not even saying everything. Maybe it's just this one event that feels so exhausting and you're not seeing the fruit that you want to see. Or maybe it's this one campaign that you've done every year and people are no longer excited about it and no longer talking to you about it. I'm not saying your entire program needs to be revamped, but think about if there are certain things that you're doing that maybe have you on the treadmill. Now we're going to go through a 5-step process of how to get off of the treadmill about some specific things. So we broke it down into 5 steps. I know that many people think in 5-letter words these days, since a certain game came out and everyone can only think in 5-letter words. And so the 5-letter word here is the word drive. We're going to work through this word to help figure out how to get off the treadmill. Also, I want to mention any group can do this. So if you have a large organization and you want everyone involved, that's wonderful. If you just want to do this with your development team, that's wonderful. If you're a team of one, like I was for a while, and you're all you got, you can do this by yourself too. This process works across the board. Okay, so let's start with discover. We can't solve a problem until we know what that problem is, so we're going to start by discovering the problem. This is an MRI machine. So some people may have been through an MRI before. The purpose of an MRI is to take imagery of the inside of your body, and sometimes they're not a very enjoyable experience. You have to sit really still, the machine is loud, it's not really the best experience. So the person who invented this particular MRI machine is named Doug Dietz. He worked on this MRI machine for 2.5 years, and it was the best imaging that MRI had seen until then. So he worked really hard, got great results, did exactly what he needed to get great images. He went to visit a hospital, and he was in the room, and the tech asked, can you step outside for a moment? We have a patient coming in to take an MRI. And he said, of course. Stepped into the hall, saw a family with a little daughter, and the daughter was really upset. And the parents were saying, it's okay, you got this, don't worry about it, it'll be over quickly. And Doug realized that the little girl was afraid of the MRI machine. So he came back in and talked to the tech, and the tech said, yeah, actually 80% of children who go through this MRI machine have to be sedated because they're afraid of the noises, they can't sit still, we have to sedate them. So Doug realized that there was a problem with this machine. The people who were going through the experience were not able to enjoy the experience, were not able to even face the experience. They had to be sedated. And so he could have stopped and said, well, you know, life is tough and we have to get images of people, and this is how we do it. But he didn't. He had discovered a problem and decided to fix it. So the way that he fixed it is by creating this very adventuresome series. It's actually called the Adventure Series, and he wrapped these MRI machines in these adventure themes. So as you can see, this is a pirate ship. There are 9 kinds of Adventure Series MRIs. And again, he still needed to get the images in the same way as he needed to get the images with the previous MRI machine. He needed to get the images, but he wanted to fix the experience. So he did, even down to, there's one that's a spaceship, and I love this one because the MRI tech reads a script when the child is going through the spaceship, and when they hear the loud noises, the MRI says, you know that we're about to get ready for liftoff. We have to stay really still as we blast off, and the child is part of this experience as opposed to something they just have to go through. I really commend Doug Dietz for solving this problem because, again, he didn't necessarily need to. He was getting what he needed. And that can be true for fundraising as well. Maybe you don't need to fix a problem. Like, I didn't need to change my planning because it was working. But in order to have growth, have a better experience for my donors, I needed to change something. So how did he discover the problem? He talked to the people who are living through the experience, the same way that you can do that with your donors or with the people connected to your organization. You can talk to other staff and find out what events or campaigns are kind of redundant to them. You can also talk to your donors. So let's do a few examples. One way to talk to your staff is this stop, start, continue chart. So this is something we do at DonorPerfect, which is really helpful. We have this very open meeting where we're able to share things that we think we should stop doing, start doing, or continue doing. And I think this is an incredibly healthy habit for any organization. I'll give you a few examples. Let's say this is a start, stop, continue for an auction. So Sherry shares that she would like to start doing kickoff meetings. Maybe there was some confusion between Sherry and Robert and they didn't know who was doing what. And so if we had a kickoff meeting at the beginning of the campaign, then it would be easier to know who was going to do what. Great idea. Thank you, Sherry. This is a great way to document that. Robert shared that he was having a hard time because we were selling tickets in multiple places. Like we had students selling tickets, they could buy tickets online, people could come into the office and buy tickets. And so it was really hard to keep track of who had tickets and who didn't. So Robert in the Stop, Start, Continue meeting shares, we're selling tickets in too many places. We need to put it down to just one place, which in this case, that would have been difficult for us because maybe some people didn't trust giving online, or maybe students were able to build relationship because they were selling tickets. But this note helped us to realize how difficult it was for Robert to track those tickets. And so we need to do something about that, whether that's to stop selling tickets in multiple places or to find another solution. At least Robert got to share what his friction was. And then lastly, Jamar explained that he thought the best part of the auction was when students came up and shared stories, and he thinks we should continue to do that. And that's a great thing to document. So that's one way to get some feedback to discover problems from your staff. Now, another group of people that need to help discover problems are your donors, or are people that are connected to your organization. So you can look at declining numbers, like if an event is not as well attended as it used to be, or if your giving is going down, or if your retention numbers are low. You can also look for donor testimony. Maybe reach out to your SIBUNs. Those are people who gave some year but not this year. Those people gave for a reason once. So maybe if they're disengaged, there's probably a reason. Reach out to them and ask them why they stopped giving. Even former board members. I had a few board members that rotated off of our board. And while they were on our board, incredibly involved, showed up to every event, constantly giving, wonderful advocates for our organization. But then once they rolled off the board, they weren't as involved. So having a conversation with them about why they maybe stopped being so involved would help me to discover more problems. Okay, so we've discovered, now we've talked to the right people, we've figured out what some of the problems are, we're discovering the problem. Just like Doug Dietz discovered the problem with the MRI machine, we need to discover the problem by having the right conversations. Step 2 is to realign. Now, there are 2 steps to step 2. First is to remove bias. This one is always so interesting because maybe someone on your staff is really, really, really connected to a certain event. For example, someone on my staff was really, really, really connected to our golf tournament. We were seeing declining numbers. People were not as involved. People were not as excited when we announced the date. But this person was like, we've been doing it for 16 years. Why would we stop doing it? So we want to have the right conversations to remove bias before we make any big changes. So how do we break down those walls? We're going to try this little activity called the 5 whys. The 5 whys is where you pose a phrase, then someone else asks why. The first person answers why, and then you ask why again, and then they answer and you ask why again, and so on. And finally, you'll get to kind of the root of why something is happening. So here's an example. We're going to say that George was really, really, really connected to our golf tournament. The phrase is, we do a golf tournament every year. My question, why? Because it raises money and is a great way to engage specific donors. Why? Because that's the only thing those donors want to come out for. Why? Because they're not interested in anything else we are doing. That is a yikes moment for me. If your donors are only interested in a day on the golf course and they're not interested in your mission or in being part of something that you're doing or showing up to your site to help build, then that's a problem. So that's why this last one says yikes, because you don't want donors who are just interested in being on the golf course with you one day a year. Which leads us to a little side note. Are your donors on their own fundraising treadmill? Are there people giving to your organization because they give once a year, and that gift is actually the money that it costs to play in that golf tournament, and really all they want is to be on the golf course, that means they are on a treadmill themselves, and we want to break them out of that treadmill as well, because again, doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over will not cause growth. It will cause just redundance. So if you want to scan this QR code, just open your phone to your camera. You can scan this QR code for some strategies on how to build multi-donor relationships, or multimedia donor relationships. So the way to connect with your donors in more than one channel, like to be able to connect with those golf givers more than once a year. Highly recommend. Okay, so back to us being on the fundraising treadmill. So now we know, okay, this is not great that our donors want to be part of only one thing. I want to point out two things here. One, we didn't need all 5 whys. We only needed 3 whys and a yikes. It wasn't necessary to go as deep as maybe it would be in other circumstances, because we got to the root of the problem very quickly. Secondly, you could do this as a group. Maybe you could do like a speed dating activity where one person asks why and everyone moves around in a circle to get different answers, because maybe George thinks that these donors will only come out for that event, but Fred thinks that this event is the best way to get our name out in the community or something. You know, other people may have other stances on why we do this certain event. So you can do it with a group, or you can do it by yourself, or you can do it one-on-one. Second fold of making sure we're aligned is to provide proof. So it's very important not to just say, hey, I feel like this event is a bust. You have to provide the proof. You can do this by the reports, like what we talked about earlier, declining attendance, declining giving. You can also look at other organizations, like maybe look at, for us, we had another organization in Broward County that also did a golf tournament, and they also saw declining numbers. And so instead of a golf tournament, they canceled the golf tournament and started doing an event the day before Valentine's Day. And this became their new staple event, because people who weren't interested in golf were able to come to that event, and they could invite the people who were interested in golf, but not because they wanted to be out on a golf course, because they wanted to know more about the organization. So, and we live in a time of social media, so you can follow any kind of organization and kind of borrow ideas from each other and see what's working and what's not. Okay, so those first 2 steps, discover and realign, are both steps for figuring out the problem. Now we're going to go a little bit into how to find the solution, which this step is my favorite. The ideate step is my favorite, because this is where you get to be a little bit creative in trying to reach the solution. Okay, so let's get creative. One example we're going to use is this project called storyboarding. I'm sure you've heard of storyboarding. It was used by Disney back in the Steamboat Willie days. It's a very long time proven creativity project. So we're going to do a little bit of storyboarding here with, again, one of my many failures. So I had this communication piece called the 3-2-1 email. We sent it every week, and it was 3 announcements, 2 opportunities to give, and 1 event coming up that people could be involved in. So I thought, 3-2-1, easy peasy. I know what to include every time. The donor knows what they're going to hear about every time. This seems simple. However, our clicks started going down. People weren't so interested in the 3-2-1 emails anymore, and I needed to figure out what the problem was. So, of course, I did the 5 whys. So I said, okay, people have stopped clicking on the 3-2-1 email. Why? Because they knew what to expect. Why? Because we used the same format every week. Why? Because that was easier for me. I was a 1-person team. I knew what I wanted to put in there, and I needed to get them information as quickly as possible. Why? Well, because we want them as informed as we can get them. We want them to know what's going on. Okay, so That is the purpose of the 3-2-1 email, to inform the donors, not to get clicks on an email, not to make sure that they're seeing the same announcements every week, but to get informed donors. So let's say that's my end result. Starting with the end in mind is a very important habit for highly effective people. Dr. Stephen Covey always talks about starting with the end in mind. So we're saying our end result was to get informed donors. Great. How do we get there? So this is where the creativity comes in. You and your team can sit down and fill out the steps to getting to informed donors. And the good news is it doesn't have to be an email. It can be whatever you want it to be. You can say, okay, we're gonna do these storyboards and you can't use email. You have to use something else. Maybe people will become creative with video or with texting or with announcements in publications. Help people to really think outside the box for filling in these couple of storyboards, because then you'll get some new ideas for this ideate stage. In the end, you'll get something that looks kind of like this, words and doodles and arrows and things all over the place, but people will be able to explain some new ideas and you won't feel stuck on the treadmill, because I've done the 3-2-1 for a year. There are plenty of new ideas that can be used to replace that to help inform donors. This specific image is from a book called Game Storming, and it's a really great asset for people who are trying to get some ideas on the board and to brainstorm as a group. So highly recommend that book. Another idea for how to get creative and ideate during this stage is to think as other members of your team. So let's say you have these 4 teams. You have the development team, the program team, the executive team, and some event attendees. And maybe you don't have very many people on your executive team. Maybe pull your board members in for that conversation. Have everybody in the same room sitting at a large Post-it note. At that Post-it note, each team will write their specific goal for an event. So here's an example. The development team's goal for the golf event is, in my case, it would be to raise $80,000. So I would fill that out as a development team member. Next, we would all rotate. So the development team rotates to the Post-it note where the program team put their idea. The program team rotates to the executive team rotates to event attendee, and event attendee rotates to the development team. Now, this is a way for people to think like other members of their team. So I said the development team needs to raise $80,000. And now the event attendees are going to try and solve that problem on the second half of the Post-it note. They're going to say, this is how we will accomplish that. This gives an opportunity for you not to have to solve every problem and to get creative in the room to try and figure out the best way to solve that problem. Not just your team, but other teams who also have a stake in what you're doing. So these are 2 really helpful ways to create some new ideas. The 4th step is value. So this, I just want to stop for a moment. This is what we talked about at the beginning. You are doing so much, and I know that. I know you're wearing many, many hats. As a nonprofit employee, you are a relationship builder, you're a marketer, you're an event planner, you're doing a million things. So you need to take a moment to really decide which activities or which processes have the most value for you, for your team. So I'll give you a couple examples from my experience. This is a pretty simple back of the napkin matrix that measures low effort and high effort and low impact and high impact. So obviously you want to spend time doing the things that fall in high impact, but you don't always want to expend all of your energy. So you need to kind of value whether or not you're going to spend time on a certain thing. So let's go through these as an example for my organization. First, for me, it would be low effort, but also low impact to respond to social media comments. We were an organization that helped out in schools. And so the people that were speaking to us on social media were usually students. So as a development director, the students in the schools weren't the people that I needed to be talking to all the time. It would be low effort for me to go on our social media and start responding to students, but it would also be low impact for the thing I was trying to work on. So that would fall in that quadrant. Another example of low effort but high impact would be making sure I have a campaign specific header on my giving page. DonorPerfect does giving pages, and you're able to customize the header image so that when people fall onto your DonorPerfect page, they know what they're trying to give to. That was really low effort for us, but high impact because people knew what they were doing. Same with having a give button on the website. It was low effort, but high impact. Now, in the third quadrant, something that took a lot of effort, especially during COVID years, was planning an event in a box. So we weren't able to have events, so we started sending events in a box. We did a DVD player, or a DVD with a popcorn snack and this whole event in a box, and we didn't receive very many gifts from it. It was a whole lot of work to put everything together, and we didn't see much fruit. So high effort but low impact. And then lastly, high effort, high impact for me was building an auction committee. It took a lot of work to get the right people in the room to help us to plan an auction, but once we had the right people, that was a high impact opportunity. This could be true for your organization, or yours could be completely switched around with completely different ideas. But it's important to sit down and really grade out what's most valuable for you with the highest impact. This is another way to really gauge impact. This is a little more sophisticated. It's a scorecard. So going through and deciding which criteria is the most important to your organization and weighting that criteria. So for my organization, our most important criteria was donor reach and return on investment. And so any projects that were not high in those categories were not worth it to us. So for example, here we had a fun run that was really low in donor reach. It was the same 20 people every year, and it was really low on return on investment. And so we want to replace the fun run with a different event that reaches the things that we're worried about: donor reach and return on investment. So let's look at some ideas. Maybe a data project. Those are really high numbers for donor reach and return on investment. If we're saying that's what's most important for us, then maybe we should do a data project. Or focusing on monthly giving has a really high return on investment. So maybe instead of doing a fun run, we decide we're going to really focus our efforts on monthly giving. This is an opportunity to, again, get off the treadmill and evaluate what's going to be most important for your organization. Okay, so we have discovered, we have realigned, we have come up with some ideas, and we've assessed the value of those ideas. Now it's time to really execute. That means you're ready, you've gone through all the stages, you've figured out what's wrong, you've made sure your team is on the same page, you've come up with some brainstorming activities that have given you new ideas, you've decided which ones are most important to you, and now you get to execute. Here are a couple of examples of ways to execute through project management. So this is kind of like a big board, and the colorful squares are Post-it notes. The lines on the left are examples of projects. So say the first line is going to be about doing your annual appeal. So you need your executive director to write a letter. You need someone to go to your site and take photos. You need to capture a story that you're going to share in the annual report. Each of those things would go on a Post-it note, and as those things are completed, you can move them through a process of project management so everyone knows where things are. So let's say you need that letter from your executive director to put in your annual report. This first column can be hasn't started yet. The second column can be in writing. The third column can be in review, and the fourth column can be done. And so as your executive director works on that project, you slowly move it through these stages so everyone knows where things are. Here's another very important key thing is that there needs to be a clear vision of success. Everyone on the team needs to be able to see how things are moving along, especially for those who are uncomfortable with change, which I understand. You have been doing something year after year after year after year. So now you need to show how it's better and how things are moving along as you're working on this new idea. So habits of a high functioning team is to do those kickoff meetings like Sherry said. Maybe have a brief on who's doing what so people can continually return back to that and figure out what they need to be doing at that time. Making sure there's a project plan and a pipeline and that people know where they're headed is incredibly important. Here are a couple of other habits like using a sprint. So at DonorPerfect, we plan like this. We plan in 2-week sprints. You do a sprint planning at the beginning, and then you do check-ins throughout the time. And that's where the retrospective comes in, which is that stop, start, continue, to be able to really think through what has worked. The most important key here is backlog. So that goes back to what we were saying about certain things will not be as high of value as other things, and you only have so much time on your plate. So the things that fall into backlog, the things that fall into, yeah, that would be great one day, you don't want to lose them completely, but you can't work on them right now. So categorize them as backlog and return to them later. You don't have to completely forget about them. Okay, I know I threw a lot at you, and if you take one thing away from this whole presentation, it should be this. Are you on the fundraising treadmill? Just think about that for a second. Are you doing the same thing year after year after year after year because you don't have time, because it works, because you can't fight with your executive director anymore about the golf tournament? What is it that is keeping you on that fundraising treadmill, and how can you get off? If you're going to do something now, you can go back to your organization and take a critical look at the treadmill that you may be on and the treadmill your supporters are on. Like I said, there was that multi-channel communication ebook that would be helpful to get your supporters off the treadmill. You can challenge your assumptions and open yourself up to the unknown by brainstorming and by having candid conversations where you ask why. Okay, I know that was so much information, and I really appreciate you all listening. I would love any questions that you have, and if you'd like to download the presentation, you can scan this QR code and you will have the PDF of the slides.
Thank you, Julia. So we'll just jump into the Q&A portion. We had quite a few questions rolling in, so we'll just start with the first one. We had a few people reach out requesting clarification on a couple of terms. So first, what do you mean by a data project?
Okay, so a data project could be a few things. One, it could be like cleaning up your data. So for example, DonorPerfect has this thing called the Clean Data Checklist, where you go through and make sure that all of your data will pull in the right way. In any CRM, you can pull reports on certain things, but if your data is not consistent, then maybe people could be taken out. But in this case, a data project would be something like a prospecting project, like finding out who in your community has a high capacity to give that hasn't given to you yet, or who in your database may have more capacity to give that you could lean on a little bit more. DonorPerfect works with a program called Donor Search, and they have this integrated like survey tool that helps you to see the capacity of your givers or of those in your community.
Thank you. They were also wondering about the word ideate and ideation.
Sure, that's like coming up with ideas. So when you ideate, it's when you come up with an idea.
Perfect, thank you. And then the next question, do you have any advice for someone who is in a one-person fundraising department? So someone who finds themselves on the treadmill.
Yeah, like I said, I was on the treadmill and I was a one-person fundraising department for a long time. I would have two suggestions actually. One would be you can lean on other members of your staff in a simple way. So for me, I went to my executive director and said, hey, if we're going to say that we need to raise a certain amount of money, it can't just be me. I would like 5 hours from every full-time employee for calling donors or for writing thank you notes or something like that. I think that leaning on other members of your staff that are maybe not fully development is totally okay, including volunteers or other donors that are really involved. You have other people that maybe aren't full-time paid employees that you could lean on. So I would recommend that. And then secondly, this is back to the grace conversation. You're already doing so much, so maybe just pick one event or campaign that you could get creative about. Maybe you don't have to revamp your entire program, but this year you could do this one thing a little bit different, or this year you could implement monthly giving. Doing it in small sections is probably the best way to go.
Thank you for those takeaways. Do you have any tips for getting effective feedback from different groups of people, such as donors versus staff?
Yeah, so I definitely recommend the start, stop, continue for staff, especially if you can have incredibly open conversations. It's been interesting for me because there have been times where my team has had open conversations and we've disagreed. Like I said in that example, Robert shared that he thought we were selling tickets in too many ways, but we all thought that was incredibly important. But it still gave us an opportunity to create a solution for all of us that would work. So having space for those really safe, healthy conversations is really important when it comes to staff. And then when it comes to donors or volunteers or people outside of your organization, I think it's important to have a relationship with those people and be able to sit down with them and find out information. But you can also send out a survey. In one email, do an email that says, hey, we want your feedback, and have them fill out a survey about, things that you're doing that they look forward to, or if they have an idea about an event that you could do, or get their input and tell them how valuable that is. Encourage them to take those surveys.
Do you have any other examples of successful fundraising campaigns you could share?
Oh my goodness. Well, there are a lot. And then the catch with successful fundraising campaigns is that it can differ. So I was saying the other day, I've been part of quite a few Giving Tuesday campaigns. So one year I did a Giving Tuesday campaign where we needed to raise $10,000 specifically on that day in order to hit a match. So we were really, really conscious about raising large amounts of money. So that year was great because with the match, we raised $20,000 on that Giving Tuesday, which is wild for one day, which was great. But the next year, we decided that we weren't as interested in a large gift. We were more interested in new givers because they would be long-term partners. So our Giving Tuesday ask the year after was just to give $2. We wanted people to have a very, very low threshold to be involved in the organization, and we didn't need these big gifts. But if you compare those 2 years, one looks like it was a failure because financially we didn't raise 20 grand in $2 gifts, but we succeeded in having over 100 brand new donors. So that was a huge success for us too. So I think defining success is the most important part of a successful campaign, whether you're trying to raise money, whether you're trying to make a match, whether you're trying to get new donors, whether you're trying to upgrade donors who have already given. That is all what dictates whether or not there's a successful campaign.
Thank you for sharing those campaigns. Hopefully they spark some ideas for the audience. On to the next question. So how do you handle a situation where you are trying to get engagement ideas from stakeholders, such as volunteers or board members, but aren't getting anywhere?
Oh, yeah, I mean, honestly, I would cry usually. It's I know it's so much pressure on fundraisers to find out those things. I think maybe interweaving those questions into more natural conversations that are already happening. So for example, if you have a gala coming up, strategically placing members of your staff at each gala table so they can have candid conversations about things that are maybe going well or things that the donor can give input on is a great way to get face-to-face communication when maybe they're not responding to something like an email survey. Also, if someone gives and you give them a call and you say, hey, I just want to thank you for your gift. We're so excited that you're going to be part of the partnership in order to achieve our mission. I want to know why did you decide to give, or what is it that we could be doing that would make you want to give more? Asking those questions during a different engagement may be a good way to go.
Thank you. Well, the next question is pretty specific, but do you have any suggestions on connecting with the right donors? We have tried, and most donors were our own staff, and the people we connect with day to day are participants we don't want to ask to give.
I do understand that. Like I said, my organization was in schools, and so the people benefiting from our mission were not the people that would be giving to our mission. I think maybe finding other places in your community where people are interested in impacting the community. So maybe like a key club or like a community betterness club, something like that. For example, in Fort Lauderdale, we have a giving circle that is a group of people from the community that just want to give to organizations that are making a difference. So finding those places outside of your organization, outside of the people who are already giving, is valuable. I think the best way to find them is maybe through social media or online, or by asking around to other organizations. You know, we're all in this to better our communities, and to, you know, a rising tide rises all boats. So seeing each other as competition is never a good idea. So leaning on other organizations to say, hey, are there any communities that you have been able to share your mission with and they've been interested, is a great way to find some new donors.
Perfect, thank you. And then the next question is, how do you explain to your executive director and board that you need to change and ideate? Some organizations are really stuck in what worked in the past.
Yeah, that is definitely hard, and it's something that I ran into a lot. The best way for me to do it was to take that information, take the feedback from the surveys, and look at our giving or our attendance numbers. If those are declining, then you can't really deny if something is no longer working, because the numbers are saying that it's not working. So definitely gather your information, gather your proof, and then go speak with your executive director and say, you know, this, and this says that this is no longer working. What can we do to either make it better or to be creative?
Thank you. Okay, so this question is regarding the presentation. So are the programs you spoke about during the session like Donor Search only for the US? If so, do you have any suggestions for something similar in Canada?
I think Donor Search is available in Canada. DonorPerfect is also available in Canada. And our forms, the other things that I mentioned, are available in Canada. We have specific representation in Canada. So they know better about the other things that they can offer, but we do connect with a lot of organizations in Canada.
Perfect, thank you. And do you have tips for presenting a case to leadership for ending an event or reprioritizing some of the work? Sometimes our board or leadership has different ideas about where we should focus our energy.
Yeah, I mean, there's always people that have all the opinions, which I totally understand, and I ran into that a lot in my old organizations as well. Again, I think gathering proof and being able to say, like, even something as small as my 321 email, my executive director loved the 321 email. And so when I went to him and said, hey, our donors don't like that email anymore, they're not reacting, they're not clicking, they're not opening, and here's the proof. Do you want me to spend my time working on something that's not working, or would you rather me do this thing that might work better? And giving them the opportunity to see if something isn't working through proof and through examples.
Thank you, Julia. And to end off, are there any trends you are seeing right now that fundraisers should be aware of?
Oh my goodness. I think honestly the biggest one is AI. I think there are a lot of opportunities with AI when it comes to fundraising. DonorPerfect just put out an AI for fundraisers ebook, so I would highly recommend heading to our site and downloading that reference. There's a lot of opportunity for AI to help you save time, and I think that it's very cutting edge at this moment, but soon it will be very natural and a lot of people will be doing it.
Thank you so much for such a great presentation. As we are closing in on the hour mark, do you happen to have any final comments before we sign off today?
I think my biggest thing is just to give yourself grace. We are doing our best, and that is very clear. So don't put too much pressure on yourself as a fundraiser or as a nonprofit employee. You're making a difference in the world, and that is amazing.
Thank you so much, Julia. I just wanted to remind everyone that you will receive a follow-up email tomorrow with a link to the webinar recording, so please feel free to share this link with your colleagues. The email will also include a survey link that you can fill out with your feedback on today's webinar. You should see a survey link pop up right here in Zoom following the session as well. On behalf of Charity Village, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you'll join us for our next free webinar, introducing the 2023 Canadian Nonprofit Sector Salary and Benefits Report. You can find more information on this and all of our upcoming webinars at charityvillage.com/webinars. Thanks again for joining us today. I wish you all a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.